in mid-October 2016 called Essential Consultants. Daniels says the agreement was appealing because it meant she would receive some money, but also not have to worry about the effect the revelation of the affair would have on her child, who was now old enough to watch the news. She signed the agreement 11 days before the election. Was it hush money to stay silent?
Yes. The story was coming out again. I was concerned for my family and their safety.
I think some people watching this are going to doubt that you entered into this negotiation because you feared for your safety. They're going to think that you saw an opportunity.
I think the fact that I didn't even negotiate, I just quickly said yes to this very, strict contract, and what most people will agree with me, extremely low number, is all the proof I need.
You feel like if you had wanted to go public, you could have gotten paid a lot of money to go public in an
Without
interview.
a doubt, I know for a fact. I believe without a shadow of a doubt in my heart, and some people argue that I don't have one of those, but whatever, that I was doing the right thing. I turned down a large payday multiple times because, one, I didn't want to kiss and tell and be labeled all the things that I'm being labeled now. I didn't want to take away from the legitimate and legal, I'd like to point out, career that I've worked very hard to establish. And most importantly, I did not want my family and my child exposed to all the things that she's being exposed to right now. Because everything that I was afraid of coming out has come out anyway. And guess what? I don't have $1 million. You didn't even buy me breakfast.
We have Chief Washington correspondent for Bloomberg, Kevin Cirilli in Washington, and CBS News correspondent Errol Barnett, who's joining us by phone from West Palm Beach, Florida. And Boston, we have CBSN political contributor and columnist for the Boston Herald, Michael Graham. Gentlemen, thank you all for joining us. Kevin, I want to start with you. We all just got a chance to listen to that video and also watch it. What did you make of Stormy Daniels' interview? I mean, there were some wow moments, some whoa, did that really happen? And do you question her credibility at this time?
Well, look, I think we should keep out the salaciousness of the story and focus on following the money. And the bottom line is that this presents new questions about Michael Cohen, President Trump's personal attorney, about that payment a couple of weeks before the election. Now, I've spoken with sources, legal experts as well, within the past couple of weeks who suggest that this could potentially be a legal fishing expedition, as we heard in tonight's interview with Anderson Cooper regarding Bob Mueller's investigation and whether or not this now provides direct access to Michael Cohen and the questions that he has access to. So I think if you're looking at this from an outside perspective, it really does present questions about a payment that was made a couple of weeks before the election, and whether or not, it's not whether or not that would have had an impact on the election, it's whether or not that provides a legal avenue for Bob Mueller's team to question Michael Cohen more aggressively as he looks into what has been going on in his own investigation.
You make a great point there, especially when they talk about how it could create a legal mess going forward here. How do you expect the White House to react to this information?
Well, look, I've been in several of these press briefings with President Trump within the past couple of weeks. This is not something that he has chosen to comment on directly. The White House has not chosen to comment on this directly. And I don't see that, whether or not they are going to, we'll have to wait and see. I can tell you that I talk frequently with sources close to this administration, as well as sources inside the administration, and they are not focused on this. They are not talking about this, even off the record. They don't view this as something that they feel is going to hinder them as they move forward. The question becomes, as Bob Mueller's investigation, which they are very much talking about privately and publicly to some extent, as that investigation continues, is there a way to potentially even ask further questions of Michael Cohen about this, again, payment that was made a couple of weeks? And does that lead Bob Mueller's team down a new route?
All right, Kevin, stand by for us. Errol, Melania, the First Lady there, remained back in Mar-a-Lago on Sunday while President Trump returned to Washington. Do we know if the First Lady watched the interview?
No, DeMarco, there's no indication from the White House, and nor do we expect to get one that would confirm that the First Lady watched this interview. The White House did explain that today, as President Trump returned to Washington after spending the weekend here with the First Lady and their son, Barron, while also making a few visits to his West Palm Beach golf course, that Melania Trump would stay behind, the White House says, as part of a family tradition for spring break. But as was just noted, the White House is well aware of how damaging the optics of this is, particularly because in this 60 Minutes interview, there wasn't necessarily one detail that was a bombshell that is really a game changer, but what you're seeing is this pornographic actress willing to go on camera, willing to defy the non-disclosure agreement, she says, because the story is true. And she doesn't necessarily come across as someone who is specifically looking for money or specifically looking for fame. She told the story about feeling threatened in that Las Vegas parking lot by someone she says she would recognize if she saw again the man telling her to leave Trump alone, forget the story. She felt that he threatened her little girl by saying, that's a beautiful little girl. It would be a shame if she didn't have a mother. All of those things, in her view and her lawyer's view, seeking to give her a sense of credibility. And the one thing that Michael Avenatti has done over the past month, since all of this has really blown up, is he's done whatever he can to keep this story in the news, releasing hints of information each week, whether it was showing Clifford attached to a lie detector kind of device, a polygraph test, whether it was tweeting an image of a DVD inside what appeared to be a safe, saying how much is this worth, and now even in this interview, Clifford not denying or acknowledging if she has further proof of text or images. Just that in and of itself seeks to keep this in the public eye, something that the White House certainly does not want to have happen. And the New York Times is reporting that while here in West Palm Beach this weekend, President Trump met with Michael Cohen, his personal attorney. It would be understandable if this was a topic they discussed, not because of the moral layer of this story, but as we've already mentioned, because of the legal opening this could give Special Counsel Mueller to get Michael Cohen in front of him and look into these financial links between him and the president.
Errol, you make a lot of good points here. These are serious allegations. I want to go back to the First Lady there with Stormy Daniels saying that the president allegedly told her that they sleep in separate rooms, Melania and the president. Do you expect for the First Lady to address this? Do you think she'll say something or just stay quiet?
I do not. It would be highly unusual. In the past, what we've seen from the First Lady during the overseas trip to Saudi Arabia, for example, a subtle slap away of the president's hand after they both deplaned off of Air Force One. We've seen her Twitter feed mysteriously like certain tweets that were critical of the president and complimentary to the First Lady. That really has been the full extent of any expression of disagreement with the president. We know that her main focus and campaign is an anti-cyberbullying initiative, with many people criticizing her for not turning around to her husband and telling him to tamp down his insults. And she said as recently as these past few weeks that she is well aware of the cynicism that people send her way. But it would be incredibly surprising if she was to respond to this directly. I will be here and poised and ready if she does while she's here in West Palm Beach, but that certainly would break with what we've seen already.
Yeah, we will certainly will be watching, and it has also been interesting just to watch both the president and the First Lady in showing public displays of affection over the past couple of days and weeks there. Michael, I want to bring you in right now and play another bite from the interview for you to have a look at this and listen to this before we talk.
I was in a parking lot going to a fitness class with my infant daughter. I was taking, the seats facing backwards in the back seat, diaper bag, getting all the stuff out. And a guy walked up on me and said to me, "Leave Trump alone, forget the story." And then he leaned around and looked at my daughter and said, "It's a beautiful little girl. It'd be a shame if something happened to her mom." And then he was gone.
You took it as a direct threat?
Absolutely. I was rattled. I remember going into the workout class and my hands were shaking so much I was afraid I was going to drop her.
Did you ever see that person again?
No. But if I did, I would know it right away. I'll never forget.
You'd be able to recognize that person?
100%. Even now.
If those accusations are indeed true, it's enough to make anyone fear for their life. What's your reaction to this?
Well, I don't think my reaction is nearly as interesting as that of my readers and listeners. I talk to a lot of conservatives. You know, the podcast I do targets a conservative audience, and they simply refuse to deal with this story. It is amazing to me the gap between the coverage the story is getting, broadly, and how people in conservative media have essentially cauterized the wound. They won't talk about it. And if you, one of the dismissal points that they use is that, well, this was a long time ago. And so when you bring up the issue of the threat, well, he wasn't president, he didn't do it. This isn't Trump, it's lawyers, it's a tough world out there. She's in a tough industry, and they are looking for every way not to confront the very serious allegations from Trump's past. But they also are very quick to point out that it is Trump's past, that it's not now. And the magic word for conservatives who are staying with Trump, and his numbers among evangelicals are still very, very high, the magic word is Clinton. And they use Clinton in two ways. One is they point out that Democrats didn't mind when Clinton was cheating on his wife in the Oval Office, literally, and they defended him for years and made a hero out of Hillary for standing by him despite this egregious behavior. And then the other way they use the word Clinton is Hillary Clinton. They were so determined for her to not be president that they essentially didn't care. Now, it's fascinating to me, the number of conservatives who told me straight up, I knew what I was voting for as long as it kept Hillary Clinton out of the White House. I don't care, which is a very different message from their attitude about personal values and integrity and honesty in the past.
All right, let's talk about the president. He has remained relatively quiet on this topic. After watching the interview here, this program, can he stay that way? Can that strategy still work, especially when you hear the allegations that she told the president to drop his pants and gave him a couple of swats on the behind, and it was in a joking manner. She said everything was consensual at that point. Also talking about sitting on the edge of the bed when he was inside the hotel perched. Can he stay quiet at this point?
Once again, as far as his base is concerned, absolutely. When the lawyer said, when the American people hear the full story, they're going to believe my client, and you could practically hear millions of Americans going, I don't want to hear the full story. I don't want to know. And part of this is Trump. People will believe this about Trump because he's Trump, and it's a two-edged sword. On the one hand, people hate Trump for being Trump. On the other hand, people who want other things from him other than moral guidance and turpitude dismiss it as, that's just Trump. And so once again, not the answer you expect from evangelical Christians, but it is an answer that is working in his base.
All right, Kevin, I want to go back to you. There is also the finance angle. You touched on it, to the payments made on Trump's behalf that could create a legal mess moving forward. What are the potential violations here?
Well, let's look at the facts. According to what has come out, that Stormy Daniels was paid $160,000 from Mr. Michael Cohen, the president's personal attorney, just a couple of weeks before the election. That was set up in a private Delaware-based account that was then sent to Stormy Daniels. The question becomes, and according to Mr. Cohen's public comments, both to the New York Times as well as to Vanity Fair, he says that he was not reimbursed by the campaign or by then private citizen candidate Donald Trump or by the Trump organization. The question becomes, according to FEC rules and regulations, is that okay? And if you look at previous cases, that is, ambiguous right now. That sets up a legal battle. And should Michael Cohen be brought into that type of legal battle, you get into the court world, and you know this from your own reporting, you get into a situation where every type of financial dealing is evaluated at every level. So should other investigations, such as Bob Mueller's investigations, be looking at what, when, how that legal setup was made? Were there other accounts that were made? All of those are questions that would be brought up in these types of cases. And the question really ultimately is whether or not this is going to provide a legal fishing expedition, as it's known, for other investigators to look at every which way that Michael Cohen had set up these types of payments, if there were other payments, because look, there's a lot of salacious details here. Politically speaking,
and details that you can't ignore.
Details you can't ignore.
You just can't ignore them.
Details you can't ignore. No. Yeah, absolutely. But my bottom line is that when you look at this, it's really going to be whether or not this provides Michael Cohen to be looked at more intently.
And Kevin, with that said, you just talked about Mueller and how might this scandal be used by the special counsel's investigation. Could Cohen be used as leverage when you look at Paul Manafort, who was used as an example?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's putting it more concisely than what I was saying. This is definitely an opportunity for Michael Cohen to be had leverage. New York Times' Maggie Haberman reporting that last night, Michael Cohen, President Trump having dinner in Florida last night. We don't know what they talked about. But, look, politically, this is definitely a headache that this administration, to say the least, is going to have to somehow, whether right now their course of action has been not to talk about it. That's a strategy. And whether or not they stick with that strategy, we'll have to wait and see. But legally, this presents much new questions.
Got a feeling tomorrow will be a major news day. All right, Kevin Cirilli, Errol Barnett, and Michael Graham. Gentlemen, thank you all for joining me. All right, we'll be back with more news on CBS.